Almost. We are almost live.
Kinda.
Okay. All right. Shall we get started? Today is June the 15th. It's 4 o'clock. And we are here with the Environmental Advisory Committee. I'd like to call this meeting to order and acknowledge that the press and the public have been duly notified of the meeting in accordance with the Freedom of Information Act. The first item of business is approval of the previous meeting's minutes. That meeting was on May 11th, 2023, and I wanted to see if anyone had any additions or corrections to the minutes.
I do. Just one little typo under old business, wildlife. It says lease turns Lease instead of leased, as in with a T on the end of it.
That's fine.
Yeah.
Releasing out our terms?
That's all I have.
Any other corrections or additions to the minutes? Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Next item on the agenda is citizens' comments, and I'm not aware of anyone who's requested to speak at this meeting.
No.
Okay. All right, so we'll move right into old business, and the first item is water quality.
Well, we had the meeting last month, and the folks from DHEC came and talked about PFAS and PFOA, and had some follow-up emails with that group, trying to move the needle about what our next steps would be. And we've had a lot of discussion with the Charleston water keepers and people that work in the shellfish program at DHEC and PFAS and PFOA, just trying to get a handle on what would be reasonable for us to do. Like, we don't want to invest in testing or analysis that doesn't make sense, and we don't want to do something that's already duplicating what DHEC might be doing. So there's already a database and a website where they post results from their enterococcus testing on the shore, on the beachfront, and when those test dates were. They have the shellfish program. They look at oysters on the intercoastal waterway, and there are areas that are restricted for harvesting. So, and that's looking at fecal coliforms. So trying to pull all these things together, and the groups that were involved kind of sent out a message to them and said, what would be reasonable for us to do? And so I was going to just share a little bit of some of the things that they shared with our water group, and Douglas was included on this. I know you weren't, Desiree, but so a couple of things that they had mentioned in their response, and we'll have some more follow-up with them for further discussion. So when they're looking at ambient surface water, they take all the shellfish, freshwater, and blue crabs, and they have them on their website. And I think what they do is they essentially take them and take all their samples and kind of, from what I can understand, mush them all up, or take all the results from that and get one composite number. So they had said that if that was something we wanted to do, we could do that and go through a lab called Trent Temperley, and it turns out that it's actually not very far. It's in West Ashley. They get very good results. They're a very good lab, they said, and the data would be directly comparable to our program. So that would be something we could do to look at whether we want to look at PFAS or PFOA. The question would be, what's the goal? What are we going to do with that? Do we want to test what's in the fish and the shellfish, and then test what's going out of our outfalls on the back of the island or at the marina, and see, is there things from boating or just coming off the island, whether it's a heavy metal or fecal coliforms or PFAS, PFOA, other contaminants, and see, are those finding their way into the fish or the shellfish? There's not a direct correlation to that, and that's not really DHEC's goal per se, but that was metals, pesticides, PFAS, et cetera, going off of our island, and is it making its way into the sea life there? So. And there were some other questions that haven't been answered exactly. We had had other discussion with some other DHEC representatives about some of the retention ponds on wild dunes and whether or not those might be sources of, heavy metals, algae blooms, other contaminants that might make their way into the intercoastal waterway. And so that person that we had talked to hasn't responded to that particular question, if we should test and what kind of tests we should run. But it sounds like we're making headway about a lab we could potentially use to do some of this testing. But I think we need to kind of hone in on what our overall, goal is, in my mind, is at least to get a baseline. I don't know what an action step would be. I think as a corollary, like we know about global warming because people decided to measure the temperature across the globe at some point. I don't know if they knew what they were going to do with it when they started measuring per se, but as you track results over time, you start to see trends. So I think, for me at least, and I think our group, we want to at least get a baseline level of contaminants that we might be putting into the waterway, that might be in the waterway, that might be in the sea life around the waterway that we want to consume if we're fishing or going and getting crabs or oysters. And then we can decide how we want to continue to track that over time. It's a corollary to that. I was looking at the Kiwa, let me pull that back up, the document that Douglas sent to us, and they're at a whole nother level. I mean, it sounds like they really invested a lot in doing, surface water analysis, hydrology, groundwater table study. I mean, that's a whole nother level, right? So, and that would involve more money, and that would be something, that would be like, to what, how far we want to go, to what degree do we want to do some kind of larger study on the island to look at, groundwater monitoring and tidal salt marshes and all these other things. Those are all very valuable, but that's a whole nother level, and, their document talks about the different groups that they involve from College of Charleston and DNR, et cetera, and we're, as a water group, I don't think we're at that kind of level to figure out what to do, but that's, something worth discussing or considering. But I think at least for our initial step, my sense is we just want to get some of these basic results initially, and if we want to do a larger study, that might be something for the town council to decide and look into. I don't know what the cost would be of that. Maybe we look at what that would cost and then put it to them to say, is this something you're interested in? I'm just not sure, but that's kind of where we are as of today on June 15th.
That's great. And one of the things that resonated with me, Jonathan, was it seems compelling that we get some baseline measures as we are pushing forward in environmental awareness and trying to have the cleanest island we can. And you don't have any idea how much new testing would cost? I don't think that would stop us. I just want to know whether it's something we could apply for a grant for, or whether it's something that could be funded out of the IOP budget.
No, I don't know. I've heard from 2 people at DHEC, and there's probably a couple more that I'm waiting to hear from, and I probably should have some follow-up emails with the water group with them or amongst ourselves, because I would like to go to that company they recommended in West Ashley and just kind of figure out at that point then what would we be talking about as far as running samples. It sounded like it'd be pretty straightforward for us to collect them, and you could drive them over there.
Sorry, is it General Engineering Lab? Is that the West Ashley?
No, it was, what was it called, Tempest?
Okay.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about
Trent
that.
Temperley, I think is.
Is that somebody's name? Is that a name?
I think, sorry, yeah, it's called GEL. I don't,
Yeah.
it's,
Yeah.
Gel.
Engineering Lab.
yes,
Yeah.
GEL,
Yeah,
yeah.
General
That's the-
Engineering
yep.
Labs. Yeah, they're
So
pretty well established.
GEL is the people who do the testing? That's where the testing is
Correct.
done?
Yeah.
Okay.
And they might give us a free estimate.
Oh, I'm sure you could, yeah, I'm sure we could toss and say what would it cost it, yeah.
Yeah, I think, going back to your point, I think we have to have a set of objectives or a hypothesis. I think just sampling shellfish or fish at the end point may indicate that there's something, but that whether there's a cause and effect is there, don't know. So you can start a pretty good scare if you start finding these things in the shellfish, in this, in all this, and then you can't prove a cause and effect. We were going back and talking about, so I think we need to sit down and come up with what are we specifically looking to do, and then build a plan around that.
So I had a question also.
Does that make sense? Because you look, I mean, I think.
I think we wanted a baseline of
We wanted-
values, right? And that, we're
Yeah.
not saying that because you find something going off the back of the island, it therefore led to every single
So-
fish that's back there being contaminated from that one source. But you need a baseline of something. So
Right.
it's just, as long as you're smart enough to recognize these 2 things aren't causation, they may be correlated.
Yeah, I guess one of the things, I was trying to get together with Douglas, but timing didn't work. But it would be helpful if we could get some maps of the island, and we can identify very specifically where all the outfalls are. Understand the drainage and all the linkages to the drainage, and understand where all these points are. And then identify where would be the best places to do the sampling. We've done some quick baseline. We know there's a fecal coliform problem. the question that's come up is, okay, is it the septics that are draining out into the swales and the groundwater that's going into the inlet? Or is it animal excrement, mammal animal excrement that's in the swales or dog parks or whatever? So part of the baseline, and I'll get with Douglas again when he gets back, is I'd like to try to get some maps if we can, and identify all the outfalls and where would be the prospective monitoring points. And then from there, we can identify the samples, the sampling points, the parameters we want to do, and then from that, we can give that plan to a GEL, and they can give us a cost estimate on what it's going to take to do something like that.
Jonathan?
Because if we just do this as a bunch of grab samples here and there, we're going to wind up where we did when we did the fecal coliform. It's okay, we have high fecal coliform, what do we do now?
Yeah, when we met with Charleston Waterkeepers a good year ago, we met here and we
Right.
looked at the map and we looked at those outfalls. So it's been a while since we looked at those, but we did.
But,
Yeah, well, I think we do have those outfalls identified. I think we're that far. When you say you want a thesis when we move in, I mean, because my understanding is that we're still continuing that first step that we originally set up of like, we need to find out, we need to get the data. And to me, that comes before then drafting together any thesis of like why this is. Because we found the fecal coliform, there are still more things I think we need to check for, basically,
Well,
is
yeah,
my understanding.
I
So-
agree. I think PFAS is now an issue. I think, the water and sewer, we need to follow up to see if they're doing PFAS monitoring of the effluent, and of the sludges, to understand what the impact there is. We've already got some data back from Charleston. We've got a lot of swales and a lot of drainage systems going off. What's in those drainage systems? We know there's going to be some oils. We know there's going to be putrid water, which probably has high BOD and is going to have some other things in it. I think just rushing in and going to take samples of fish and shellfish, I don't know what that's going to tell us, what that's going to do. And we don't know what the background need of that is. I mean, we'd have to find data probably from around other parts of Charleston Harbor and other parts of the inlets.
DHEC has that already published
Yeah.
from their shellfish program, their oyster program.
So that was my question
So
for
it's
you
a
is,
sample.
because they are already doing sampling, or is there any existing sampling occurring on Isle of Palms?
Yeah, so they sample on the beaches for, what was it? Enterococcus. And they sample on the intercoastal waterway for fecal coliform and oysters. And so they'll have restrictions about, I think there's one near the marina right now that's still active as far as being able to harvest those.
Okay.
Those are kind of their main ones. They've started to do some PFAS and PFOA along Cooper River and a few other sites, but nothing that's close, really close to here. I think there might be one they mentioned near Hamlin, I want to say.
Do you think there's any possibility of DHEC, possibly expanding their sampling sites so it would not, result in us spending money if they already have the resources available to do so? Maybe if we picked another sample site since there's already one.
Yeah, I think
It's a good question.
they're, if you go on their website and look at their PFAS and PFOA sampling methodology, I think they're trying to find sources that, or areas that might be a higher potential risk based on previous sites. If there's like a factory or something near a site, they would say, okay, we
Right.
should sample near this area. That's probably a higher yield. And they'd look at airports and there were a few other things on that list. And so when I reached out to them, I said, we had an airport on the island until the mid-1980s. It was pretty
Right,
small. I
right.
don't know if that's really going to impact,
Yeah.
have any impact. So they didn't really jump on that when I
Right.
suggested
Good
that,
try.
when I raised that as a possibility. So I don't know that it's going to fit within their larger strategy. And it's also worth noting that I think their monitoring and testing is very siloed. So like, it's totally different people that are doing Enterococcus and the shellfish program and ambient
Right.
surface water. They're not like trying to come up with like this really nice uniform program. So like, let's look at the water altogether. Like,
Right.
that's what we're trying to do.
Right.
But that's not their approach.
So you don't think that would necessarily be the route we'd want to take, is to enlist DHEC You think we'd be better to do it
Well,
independently?
yeah, probably. I mean, I think they already have their sampling program around the island. I don't know that they're, looking at the beach and the back of the water for fecal coliforms, and I don't think they're gonna jump on heavy metals, pesticides,
Yeah. Yeah.
PFAS, PFOA like we wanna do.
Okay.
Yeah, I sat in on that conference call with the Grand Strand, and one of the things they do is they do up in Myrtle Beach, there's a number of different communities, they do the fecal coliform testing, I think, after storms. Where they started to see higher concentrations, and this goes back to the thesis, is, once they determined that they were getting higher concentrations of fecal and total coliforms, then they started to look at where the potential sources are. And they found one particular development, and they were doing work on getting that development, getting the septics out, working on those, and they had mixed results on it. So when I say a thesis, I don't necessarily mean we have to have a specific, but if we should at least have some sort of decision tree, like if we find that the shellfish or this is that, what are we gonna do next? That's really what I'm saying. Not just, okay, we got it, because you gotta think about it. If we do find something and it's higher than DHEC, do we have to notify DHEC? If we notify DHEC, does that mean now that they're gonna shut down any kind of shellfish or fishing? There's gonna be some subsequent activity. I think we just wanna make sure we understand, if we take this data, what we're gonna do with it, what we're gonna compare it to, and what actions we're gonna take. It may turn out that, yeah, we're seeing high fecal coliform, so we're gonna have to start doing what they did up at Grand Strand, which is, where are those sources coming from? Is it this particular swale, which has a lot of septic tanks around it? So we want to just know what our next actions are going to be. That's, I think.
Yeah, that
what
makes
I'm
sense to
saying.
me, because in my mind, what comes after the data gathering is then having various possibilities of where the source is
Yep.
coming from.
Yep.
So, the suspects would be septic tanks,
Yep.
or the suspects would be animal waste on the island.
PFAS, I'm pretty confident that we know our, PFAS is going to be coming from Charleston, the water coming in that we get. PFAS is going to be coming, what people are flushing down their toilets, where they're using PFAS products. So it's either going into the septic system if they're septics, which then means it's going into the groundwater, which means it's eventually going off into the inlets. And then you have the water that's going out, the Water and Sewer Authority effluent, going into where the receiving point is. We know that if there's PFAS, it's going to come out there because the activated sludge doesn't break it down. And then we also know that we're going to be sending PFAS off in the sludge that they're creating. So, those are our key risk points on PFAS. And the more complicated, the complicated parts will be, how do you get people to stop using Teflon pots and pans? But
Yeah.
the fecal coliform is the one that's more, and some of those are a little more complicated because there's so many other potential sources. What do we do? Like start
Yeah.
hunting all the animals on the island? But I do think it's our main objective, which we said from last year, and we'll carry it over into this year, is the baseline. So I agree with you 100%.
Yeah. And I think having something in mind about what you're gonna do with the result matters, right? You don't
Yeah.
wanna just do a test if you don't have a
Exactly.
idea of what you might do with it, but sometimes having a baseline gives you an idea of then what you might do.
Well,
Which is what you were suggesting in the
yeah,
beginning.
even remediation projects start where, something wrong with my water. Okay, take a sample of your water. Okay, there is stuff in your water. Now what do we do, right?
Right,
Well,
I
that's the
think
next step, is what you were saying.
Yeah, it'd be-
First you collect the data and then
investigation and then policy. in my mind.
analyze and,
Yeah.
yeah, make
So what is the first step in moving forward with this plan, collecting the data?
Right.
Correct.
Well, I would say, if we look at it, we might want to come up with identify a number of parameters that we're interested in. So we're probably interested in heavy metals, we're probably interested in total fecal coliform, there are a couple other things that were in there, that there might be tests to do. I think we're interested in PFAS.
And then identify well, we've already got the lab, but
And we
who's
just
gonna do the
identify the
testing?
exact locations and the method of testing.
Right.
Simplest is pulling some sort of composite or grab sample, sending it in and getting the results, and just, is it above something, or is it below, is it above or below whatever an action limit is, right?
So I think by the next meeting, we're gonna have a list of what we wanna have sampled, the locations, and the cost. And we can bring that
Oh,
in,
that sounds
right?
great. That
Yeah,
sounds great, yeah.
I'm
Awesome.
happy to,
There you
Yeah.
go.
happy to roll up, because I've, worked with labs like this before and
Yeah.
all that, so.
Desiree, I just had a question that maybe, I don't know, maybe you or Matt could answer this question. On the Isle of Palms, does the city have does the city have any ordinances or regulations with regards to septic tanks? And what I'm looking for specifically, or is there any requirement that a homeowner or a rental owner have it inspected on a certain time frame? Is there any requirement to have the tank serviced on a particular schedule? Is there any requirement to have them replaced so that they don't last forever? 22 years is, I think, the average of lifespan. Is there anything that we have in our ordinances or regulations that address septic systems and maintenance or inspection or anything like that?
No, we don't. That's all regulated by DHEC. So as long as they are approved and and permitted by DHEC, they're allowed to be allowed to be installed. And that's part of the challenge, right? There is no follow-up. There is no record. DHEC has no record of those septic tanks that have failed, that need maintenance. That's part of, I think, the challenge of establishing a policy to make sure that only those that are fully functioning and being well-maintained are able to continue to be, in operation.
Yeah. And when somebody builds a new house with we've seen a lot of construction recently where smaller, older homes are torn down and they're replaced by larger homes. Is it part of the building permit that they update their septic tanks at that point, or do you know?
These are all great questions for Douglas, and sees Matt, please correct me if I'm wrong, he's a building guru. I know a couple of years ago, City Council passed a couple of ordinances that would require folks that are on septic to connect to the public sewer line system if certain conditions are met, and they're mostly related to how close they are to an existing infrastructure. So there are some rules that would require somebody to go off of septic into the system. Again, if there is infrastructure available within a certain distance.
Yeah, but you're not aware of anything that dictates that people have to
No.
replace their
Are
septic
you?
system?
I think the only thing in our code is that if you're adding any more living space, bedrooms or bathrooms, you have to get it either re-verified or act as it's entirely new. So the DEC will have to come out again and look at it.
Yeah, these
Okay.
houses
Yeah.
that are going from 2 or 3 bedrooms
If
to
you
eight
expand.
to 10 bedrooms,
Yeah.
they're not, those septic systems are not going to be acceptable. And the way they're covering the footprint of the lots, they're probably having to connect, I would think that they're connecting to the sewer system.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've talked with, Bill Jenkins and the Isle of Palm staff, I'm not sure his exact position, but he's the water and the guy you talk to with sewer and septic, and.
He knows a lot, yes.
Yes, he
We know Bill.
does. He's been around for a while. And I specifically asked some of the questions you're getting at, and this is hearsay evidence, but according to him, there is nothing that prohibits anybody, including new builds, to use septic.
Right.
So, there's, unless something happens at the council level or FEMA level, septics will continue to be allowed on the island, whether they're replacement septics or part of a new build.
Yeah, see what,
And so that's
Yeah,
something we should look
yeah, and
into.
if you look at more and more, particularly now with the PFAS issues, septics are becoming more and more frowned upon. People are trying to get away. In rural areas where you don't have access to a water or wastewater treatment plant, it makes perfect sense. But here in Isle of Palms, we do have a water and wastewater treatment plant. I think it's under capacity. I think it is, does it have capacity to probably take everyone on the island? I would think. So I'd like to see us examine the septic policy and maybe make some recommendations to the council or committee. I think, starting with understanding, one, where are all the septic systems? 2 being, where are we in the current build-out of the collection lines? So that people can know if they can connect if they wanted to. And then the other thing is looking at what's the best practice that we could recommend in terms of whether it's an ordinance or something maybe through, do we have a health department? Do we have a health?
In the city?
Yeah.
No.
Okay, yeah, see, what I've seen in the past is, and it's normally done through counties, that the health departments usually have ordinance or regulation that'll say you have to test your septic, or it has to be tested every year, you have to submit the results, and if it fails, then you have to take a court, action.
Are you
accordingly.
volunteering to come up with
Sure.
an overview
Sure.
and suggestions
Yeah.
for that?
If this is a topic that you all are interested in, I would suggest that, and I can coordinate this with Douglas, that we have Thomas and Hutton come and present the master plan that the city and the Water and Sewer Commission cost-shared and developed several years ago, that answers all these questions
that'd be
about
great.
expanding, what would it take to expand sewer island-wide, where most of the septic systems are, what are some of the areas that are more vulnerable, and a cost estimate of what that would take. And this is a master plan that the Water and Sewer Commission has used to request grant funding for expanding the sewer line.
Yeah, they can,
I'm sorry, yeah, the sewer
Yep.
system. So I think that would be very, very good information. I think that there's a lot of interest in this topic in the community, and revisiting this master plan, which, was a great effort, a collaborative effort between the two entities, to at least give us an idea of what it would take to get to that
sure.
point.
That would be
Would
good.
Desiree, would that be something that could be a community-wide presentation as opposed just to or maybe that's too far, but you're right, there's a lot of interest on the island, and I think some of our public forums have been pretty well attended.
Yeah,
I thought-
we would love to, my wife and I would love to replace the septic and connect if we can, so we'll check that. But the other thing is, each project is a custom one-off project, and the projects are expensive. $45 to convert is a lot of money. Most people, I don't know how many people have that kind of money laying around, but $45,000.
And the
450?
challenge is, because you have to extend the
Yes.
system before you tie in, that's where most of the cost is. And there are certainly grants available that the city and the Water and Sewer Commission can provide. And again, back to some of the policy recommendations that the staff made and council ultimately adopted, is what kind of, sort of small steps we can take
Exactly.
to start maybe requiring people to tie in when possible and when available. But the cost it's really the biggest hurdle.
It is.
And I think Douglas has talked about in the past, I've read it in the minutes, that in order to be able to secure financing for a project of that scale, it would require council requiring and mandating a tie-in. And that, that creates sticker shock. I mean, that's a very difficult policy decision to make for people who have a well-functioning septic system and are responsible and are maintaining it. So they're very, very complicated policy decisions about it, but I think that there are smaller things, I think, that we can still do to maybe facilitate and encourage the expansion of that system island-wide.
Yeah, I think this is a 10 to 20-year plan. This is not we wouldn't be looking at short-term, but I think it would be wise to have a short-term, as you said. Short-term is, let's make sure we know where the septics are, let's make sure we know that they're functioning properly, let's make sure when we're doing, build new building permits and building reviews, we're doing, and I'm sure we are doing that, but those are the little things. And, I think one of the more dramatic steps, and I don't know if the council has the appetite or if they've tried it, is just banning new septics. Just no longer, you have to connect.
One thing I would find helpful, because I don't want to continue dancing around the septic question, because it is a big policy reach, would have a lot of repercussions, far more than anything else that we've proposed. For me, it'd be helpful to have a file or a folder that brings together research on septic best practices, the history on the island, the financials, anything we get out of a report from Simon & Schuster, starting to build up a portfolio on the septic question, I think.
I'll take an action on it. I mean, you guys you're kind of taking the lead on the base now, the baseline work. I can support that, but I'll start doing that. I'll start building up the case.
That'd be great.
I think-
This is something I feel pretty passionate about, because I grew up around freshwater lakes, where the communities never had the appetite to put wastewater treatment, and all the All the lakes are contaminated. It's, women are getting infections, people are getting infections swimming in them.
Yeah.
You've got eutrophication because it's also the nitrogen, the phosphorus, so.
Yeah, certainly a very, very important topic.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think we have to peel back the onion. And so could we make a request to get an initial presentation? Or you had said that before.
Sure, we can, if that is the will of the committee, we can schedule a presentation, and it could be a joint presentation with the Water and Sewer Commission, and.
Yeah,
I
sort of a
think
kickoff for us starting some background,
Mm-hmm.
just to get it to understand. What does Covey say, seek to understand before you
Yeah.
seek to be understood?
Yeah, and I think that's a great idea, and I know that we are a little bit pushed for time tonight, because I know
Okay, that's
Desiree
fine.
has, I don't mean to stop the conversation, because it's a great conversation, and it's an important one to have, but I know that Desiree has to leave at 5 tonight, and so I want to make sure that we can get through as much of our agenda as possible. So then, are you guys okay to move on to
Yeah, I think we have
climate action?
we have action items for water quality.
Perfect. Okay, sounds good. Belvin, did you have anything on climate action?
So, from my recollection at the previous meeting, the discussion was that there are going to have people coming in looking at this building for renovations, was that it? Or just like a comprehensive
renovation.
diagnostic? And in that process, the idea was we can also figure out the viability of putting on solar. Do y'all remember, did Douglas say he had a talk with someone to
I
get
think
that?
he said he was going to look into it. I don't know that we've had information back from him on
Okay,
that.
well, that's
So-
a Douglas
About
question.
installing it here?
About solar panels?
Yeah.
Yes.
Do you know anything, Desiree?
Well, so for this building, we have it scheduled in FY '24 to do a renovation and potential expansion. So I think what he meant was, in that process, that could be something that could be considered at that time when we do that renovation. But
Right.
don't know if there are any, if he has any information about potential cost. I'm not sure. That would be something that we can follow up with him
Okay.
at the next
Next meeting, maybe.
meeting.
Okay.
But we are scheduled to begin the planning process for the City Hall renovation, so certainly could be an opportunity there.
Yeah, okay, I guess that's a Douglas question then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sounds like it.
Looks like Nicole's making sure that hits the minutes so we can follow up.
I'm making my notes. And I'll send it to
Thank you.
Was there anything else, Belvin?
No, I think down the line, there are, of course, many other climate actions we could take, but I want to hear back from Douglas on the solar piece.
Okay.
And one thing that I can do is I can plug a few other items, because we're now talking about individual climate action items instead of a comprehensive plan. Some top-line items that other climate action plans locally have adopted, things like the electrification of the city fleet is a common sense action that can be taken on the local level. So I'd say in future meetings, it'd be great to get that in.
Could we talk about the gasoline-powered leaf blowers?
Yeah, so I mean, we have an local example. The city of Charleston has been electrifying their leaf blowers.
Yeah, can we put that on the list?
Yeah, that'd be great. Also, just quality of
And also
life.
electrifying the city non-emergency vehicles because I don't know if EVs are fast enough to pursue some of our.
I believe they are.
Yeah.
It would be
Okay,
in-
I would like to see that on part of your process too, because I think as equipment wears out and is replaced, that's something we could
Yep.
look at for.
A lot of cities are
Environmental.
doing that, right?
Yeah.
They're changing the specifications for what they're going to purchase in the future, so when they end of life an asset that may be a fossil fuel burning asset, they then now convert over to whatever the future spec is for whatever they're doing. So
Mhm.
it's a really good practice.
It
Yeah.
would be interesting to also have conversations with the communities that have made that transition and see, lessons
they like it,
learned.
yeah.
Has it, met their expectations in terms of not only environmental, but cost as well. So I just think that while y'all doing that research, I think that would be good to consider as well.
I agree. For the city of Charleston area, I've done some research on
I
other
know they
municipalities.
recently converted.
Right, and that, before they did that, they gathered research on other communities, other municipalities that have passed similar bans, or even some quality of life things in terms of like timing of when you were allowed to use leaf blowers, and, because there's also a quality of life thing of the noise is pretty invasive.
So my friend lives up in Lake Norman, and we go up to visit on occasional weekends, and we were sitting out on his dock, and the guy next door just decides he's gonna do his, gas-powered leaf blowing, 6 hours nonstop. 6 hours nonstop.
I think we're all
I-
bothered
I-
by
I-
those.
I wanted to just,
All the houses around me,
Bang.
they have it timed
Yeah.
so that there's always one going.
Well, the decibel level,
Trimmers too, I mean, they're
Yeah.
all noisy.
Well, it would
lot of
exceed,
gas.
it exceeds what we had been talking about in the noise ordinance, because I have a measurement device on my cell phone, and it does exceed the limits that we had been talking about.
right, the decibel levels are actually absurd, and there's a human health aspect too, people don't think about, but there's a lot of exhaust going out that's just settling at the ground level. That has lots of particulates that goes into people's lungs. It's just
Yeah.
generally not great.
Belvin, do you have time to recap some of the research about this that you are aware of and have already done,
Yeah.
just to kind of help educate the rest of us?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. Whenever you
That
want
would
to
be-
schedule a little mini presentation on gas blowers versus electric blowers.
Yeah.
You want to do that next time?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sounds good. Okay, next we have wildlife, and this was something that we haven't had an opportunity to talk about so far, and that is the promotion of the use of native plants and grasses, and I know that Deb was very interested in extending that conversation, so I wanted to see if you wanted to report on that, Deb.
Yes, I don't really have much to say other than the email we got from Douglas with the Kiowa program was fabulous. And I think it was very informative and said way more than I could say about the importance of native plants. So where we go with that, I'm not sure, but other than, like Belvin mentioned, doing solar panels on, a government building, it sends a message, And so for the city to take the lead and intentionally only use native plants in common green spaces on the island would be a great start. And then, I love what Kiowa's done with having, sorry, I forgot my phone, so I don't have the thing in front of me, but.
The recognition program?
The Naturally
I
Kilo?
love that,
Yeah, Naturally Kilo. That's
And,
great.
it's a great way to educate people and get people involved, is to have that information already put together for people that are like, oh, I'd like to do that, but what do I do? Well, what a great way to get it going and encourage people.
I wonder if there's an area on the Isle of Palms that could be used, like a small area that could be planted with some of the native plants, so that people could have an idea about what that might look like.
Right.
Or how it might be
Mary's
designed.
backyard.
No problem, we got it right here.
Get rid of the lawns.
Yeah.
The Recreation
Right.
Department,
Useless.
Right.
Wildlife.
But this
Yeah.
doesn't just go to wildlife, it's also critical to water quality. It's huge. This
But
is,
the mindset here is to have the landscape people come in and just to do a certain set thing where they
Right.
mow and then they
right.
edge and then they blow
Right.
and then they
And
leave.
so-
That's what it all is.
And so how do we
My
change
neighbors
the
on both
mindset
sides
and-
poison all the plants
Mhm.
because they want to get rid of all the bugs.
Right.
And I had to stand there and keep Stark from spraying a bush that had a mockingbird nest in it with baby birds in it.
Right.
And it just,
I know.
I don't know, people just have a different, they don't think about it.
So I-
I've always said this would be a wonderful planet, except for humans.
Yeah.
I think if we can show leadership by using some public space to
Right.
plant
I think
in the
that's a good
plant garden.
start.
That's always a good place to
That would
start.
be a great start, and I think down the line, having a program like that Naturally Kiowa construction they have, where, there's certain things that a citizen can do in their lawn, you get a little marker, there's just best practices, they're shared, That'd be wonderful. It's
And
starting to
we have
spread.
The city
at least.
buildings.
This is
We've got
similar
the city
to the-
parking lot, you know, it's
Rec
got
center.
some,
Yeah,
we've got other areas.
National Wildlife Federation has a program, the Backyard Wildlife Habitat, and they tell people how to do this. And, you know, you provide nesting habitat and feeding and bathing and cover and, you know, protection. And I think that's a good program, too.
And I think it's
If the Isle of
awesome
Palms
that,
can't do their own.
yeah, but the key
people
was
could be
willing
made
to
aware of that.
share all their information.
Yeah,
That's
great.
pretty.
Yeah, I'm sure we could get
And part
consultation.
of that is
from the
you know,
key office.
using,
So it could
Plants
be,
that are
you know, starting small, like people like butterflies, right? Say, oh, if you plant these, you know, particular plants, you'll have butterflies in your yard.
hummingbird plants.
And then move forward with a rain garden. Oh, is your driveway flooding? You know, how about this? Instead of,
I'm about to begin some plantings, I'd be interested in knowing some of the species and things.
Well, there, in the Kiowa report, which is, I agree, is
Right.
fabulous. I'm not going to go
Does
into
it-
detail.
does it have plant species and
Yes,
recommendations?
Yes.
It has all the
Send me that,
information.
yeah,
I
good.
wondered, on a practical level, the Kiowa Conservancy is a 501c3 nonprofit, so I assume this report is available. I looked online, I
Yeah.
didn't have a link to it. But I would love to see our Isle of Palms website have a link perhaps to that report, if you want to know more about native plants and rain gardens and so forth. And
Right.
certainly do the things we're suggesting, but also make the information. It's so well-researched and thorough.
yeah.
Is that something that legally with attribution and so forth, not copy their report, but talk about what it
As
is
a
and do a link
resource.
to it so
Yeah.
that we start gathering some of these pathways on our IOP website so that other people that aren't in the weeds no, it's a bad pun. Yeah. As deep as we are, can go and do their own, benefit from what we're learning and gathering.
And maybe have the city use a rain garden somewhere.
Well, I have a question. So the IEP Recreation Department.
Yeah, that'd be a great space, actually.
Yeah, so I mean specifically the wall where you're walking to the dog park.
Yeah.
There's currently no vegetation there.
Right.
It's just dirt. So there's a big wall length against which there could be native plants.
Right.
Furthermore, I've noticed flooding in that area.
Yeah.
Like around the playground, there's just a lot of flooding in the monoculture grass we have there. So potentially around some of the trees that we planted, there could be some native plants.
I wonder if the garden club could be encouraged to, do something like that.
They-
Right, well, my
Great
question
It's a
resource.
natural connection, I don't know.
If we want anything at the Recreation Department, what would be the steps involved in proposing something, collaborating with all the folks who are in charge of maintaining that space, et cetera?
Yeah, I mean, I think, sounds like a great opportunity. We can have a conversation with a recreation director and their parks and building maintenance folks. There are some activities that are handled internally by their building and maintenance staff, others that are done by our landscaper. So I mean, I think that this is a very simple conversation that we can have with them and identify those opportunities to, again, maybe enhance our native plants in the area and help serve as an example. Additionally, I think in the fall might be a good time to maybe bring some of these partners to do a workshop. How to install a rain garden in your house, or how to enhance native plants in your yard. I think that would be a great opportunity. We know.
I think, another idea, the rec center is a great idea, Bevelin. Like, we could even have a community event, have the kids come learn how to build a rain garden and,
That'd be
let
great for
the
the
kids
summer camp
build it.
activities
Let
too,
the
to
kids
have
plant
activities, build a
trees
butterfly
and
garden,
flowers.
birdhouse.
Right.
I'm not sure if we
Birdhouses.
would be able to pull anything off for summer camp this year, because
Right.
it
Right.
started 3 days ago.
It's already going.
But I
Plan
think
it.
a
Yeah.
standalone workshop, and we can see how much demand there is and how interested people are to attend an event like that, and then certainly incorporate it in some of the programming for different different ages.
That'd be great. And I have two folks who we could potentially bring in to help if we are in need. Charlene Johnson is formerly of DNR, and she now has a small business, Native Plants for the People. And she's put on a presentation on native planting before, and I think she'd be happy to collaborate. And Al Mason has a local business called Planted, where she does landscape design that's all native plant-based.
Yeah.
So there are folks that we could pull
Yeah,
in
that
if
would,
we
they
want
would
any
actually be really good
consultation.
resources for us as well, yeah.
Yeah, I think it'd be really cool to have a presentation at the La Palms Rec, like in the gym area there, and then, go out and see it or do it or whatever. But there are lots of areas at the rec center that would be, I think, good places to do something like that.
Excuse me.
Because there's a lot of lawn there.
Yes.
Yeah, and it'd also be a good place to help show some of the native plants and other greenways to help with the drainage and the puddling and
Right.
bioswales and so
Right.
forth. It's not just a decorative or bio
Yeah.
flora kind
And
of
it'd be really-
activity. I think
really
there's,
interesting
It
over
would be a
time.
great way to display a lot of things we're working on.
Okay.
And the fall is when, fall and spring is my understanding for best times to plant native plants. So if we can have everything in line by the fall, then I think that'd be some great programming.
Yeah, I think
Would
that'd
there,
be
oh,
great.
sorry, would there be a way to maybe incorporate it? Because I know, I just noticed the farmer's market just started, and I think we're talking about the rec center. Do you think like maybe there'd be a way to incorporate it like earlier and start it like now with like the farmer's market, especially since you said that you know two people who have companies that kind of deal with native plants? Like, could they maybe, I don't really know how it works to get like a stand or anything, but would there be a way for them to come and like show native plants or maybe give like a demonstration
Or
or,
sell some.
yeah, sell them, yeah.
Well, there's one of them that I have seen at, I think at the Mount Pleasant Farmers Market. It might be I might be confused. I know I've seen at an event,
That's a good idea.
the person that just has native plants. No, I did see it at the Mount Pleasant Farmers Market. I did,
Yeah,
a
I
couple of
think
weeks
that'd be a
ago.
great idea. The farmer's market, it's gonna run through October, so it might be good.
Yeah.
I mean, they might have some time and
Right.
a couple of options between now and then to have a booth and display.
Who's going to follow up and invite such a person?
I will, I'll get with Belvin and make sure we're talking about the same people.
Okay.
Can we
great.
offer them any kind of a discount to set up at the farmer's market? Isn't there a fee for booths?
I think it's $20,
Oh, okay.
I believe.
Okay. All right.
I can underwrite it if necessary.
Okay.
We'll
All
make
right.
sure that the fee is not an obstacle for them
Okay. Yeah.
participating. How about that?
I think
Thank
that, I think Mary wanted to provide an update for us
Yeah, I'll
also
try to be
under
real quick.
wildlife.
Yeah, about the lease turns, I was copied on the email that was sent to the city administrators from the biologist, Mary Catherine Martin, who was overseeing that posting of that area. And unfortunately, when we had that heavy, heavy rain around Memorial Day, it flooded over a foot of water into the sort of depression where they were all nesting between the Citadel Beach House and 52nd Avenue, and it killed the eggs and it killed all the baby chicks, and it took so long for the water to recede, to percolate down into the sand, that the colony was destroyed. And the last I heard, they had seen just one or two terns hanging around but not nesting, and they think they might have gone to Capers Island or somewhere to the north of here, but they don't know for sure. But anyway, they took down all the signage, and they don't know if they're ever going to come back again or not. On a personal note, I lost all of my purple martin nestlings at the same time because of the heavy rain that kept them from feeding their young, because they rely totally on flying insects. So we're starting all over. I've got a lot of new eggs that are going to have to incubate and hatch again. So anyway, enough of that. Also, the turtle nesting, we're at 21 nests right now. Last year at this time, we were at 25, so we're looking at a little bit less than we had, but kind of a normal year. I turned in 26 genetic samples to DNR this afternoon. There are more genetic samples than there are nests because some of those were diamondback terrapin genetic samples, which they're also trying to study. The bad news is that the funding for the genetics project, which has been going on for 13 years now, has been discontinued, and they don't know if they're going to be able to read these samples and report back to us what they found. But anyway, that's too bad. Groups like ours and groups who have more money than ours, like the Kiowa people, are raising as much money as we can and sending them to the guy in Georgia who's doing that project. So we're hopeful that it can continue. Finally, about the holes on the beach, we were hoping that that would go away when the signs were put up. Unfortunately, some weeks we get 4 or 5 calls from our volunteers about deep holes that have been left on the beach. I would like to compliment our code enforcement officer, Jace Kowski. He has been working, he promised me he would talk to the BSOs about trying to educate people as they rode up and down the beach, and I hope that's helping. We didn't get that many calls this week about holes. We're just hoping that that'll be. And Sergeant Kowski is also doing a great job. He called me about a house at 206 Ocean Boulevard that had a light complaint because they had lights on, and so he seems to be wanting to enforce that, which has never been done before, the lighting ordinance. So
That's great.
I appreciate his work for the city and for the wildlife. That's about it.
So
Can I ask a question?
Oh, sorry.
It
Yeah.
might be a joint question for administration as well, but I noticed that the dunes had really been destroyed quite a bit near Breach, and I don't know if that's because of the way
Yeah.
the water currents are going with sand being deposited, but it must be impacting the ability of the turtles to nest. Is there?
The turtles cannot nest there. They will not nest in the intertidal zone between, if the tide comes up to the steep, scarped, chopped-off dune, turtles will dig and find that they're hitting the water table or damp sand, and they will not nest there. Nor can they climb up that
Right, it's like a cliff.
10-foot cliff in some places. If you look at the YouTube of the city council meeting, there was a 40-minute discussion and presentation by OCRM. I don't know if you want
Yeah,
to go
so
into any of that. I know
we-
time's short.
Yeah, we invited our coastal engineers, so it's Coastal Science and Engineering, who have designed all of the beach projects for the city for many, many years. They came in on Tuesday and gave a presentation about the condition of the beach at Breach Inlet. So very interesting. The slide deck is online next to the agenda, so just want to alert you to that.
It's very
Thank you.
interesting.
It was very, very informative, and to that question, the city has submitted a general permit application to OCRM to allow for some minor dune restoration in that area. We will be receiving advice from our coastal engineers as to the area that is more vulnerable and continues to lose sand, and then design a potential small project that would essentially include trucking in sand to build that dune. OCRM has very, very strict regulations as to when they would allow emergency work to restore dune systems. Beach scraping and sandbagging is only allowed when the mean high water is within 20 feet of a habitable structure. Sometimes they will consider pools as habitable structures. But in the meantime, there are no homes in that area that meet that emergency threshold. So the path for us is to submit a general permit application to truck in sand. And that's what we're doing. The permit application is out on public comment through Wednesday, June 21st. And then after that, we'll see whether or not the state grants permission for a project there.
What do you think the timeline is for that process? They give an
Well,
idea.
once the public comment period is done, depending on how many comments they receive and whatnot, it could probably be a week or two before they make a determination on the permit. This is OCRM. Then, we need to have a conversation with city council about the funding of that project. Council would need to approve that. whether or not it's going to be fully funded by the city or a cost share with the individual property owners there. And then it would depend on the availability of a contractor that has beach compatible sand to be able to come in. And then all of this, because we're in turtle nesting season, we fully expect conditions with the permit about daily coordination with DNR to identify turtle activity, turtle nesting activity, and potential other potential conditions that we just don't know about. So, you know, maybe mid to end of July. It really depends on how long the state takes for the permit to be considered and the availability of a contractor.
Okay.
And turtle nesting ends at the beginning of August, so, you know, however, their official season goes to the
Through
end of October because of
yeah.
hatching, but only one nest has been laid, and that's near 7th Avenue. Usually we have, one year we had more nests in that section south of the pier than anywhere else, but not this year, because they're just not able to nest there. There's no habitat. Yeah.
Thank you.
So we're at 2 minutes of, and.
Well, I wanted to give a quick update on the Fill-A-Bag program because I'd been asked to do that at the last meeting, if we can. So I contacted the individual who is responsible for that program and got some information from them regarding what the costs are and what's provided by the company as well as what would be expected for us. And essentially what they provide is they provide a couple of small signs, they provide the hooks for the post, and they provide a starter pack of 2.5-gallon buckets. They do not provide any posts, they don't provide any paint, they don't provide any screws. They look to the interested party to provide that kind of stuff. At the last meeting, when we talked about this, we identified a number of locations. A couple of those I think would be inappropriate because one was Breach Inlet, one was Fifth Avenue, and we know that we've got some erosion problems going there and probably will have some work in the near future. I think the other sites that were mentioned were 25th, 34th, 34A, and maybe around 55, 54th Avenues. And Linda and I were talking about this yesterday, so please feel free to add anything. But I think at the last meeting, we said that the city really didn't have the resources to maintain this program, and that it would really be up to the residents, to identify residents to maintain the program. And as such, I'm not sure if this is something that would be, that we want to expand. We don't have a real good sense for how much interest there would be from the, for people who are having a day at the beach to collect litter.
Have you all had any discussions with the local group, the IOP Beach Cleanup Crew?
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah,
Maybe
Susan was
they-
here.
So do they have any idea of their own volunteers, whether or not there are folks that would be willing to volunteer to sponsor one of these locations?
I have not asked that specific question. My sense is that they're pretty busy with what they're doing. They're doing twice a week beach cleanups now, so I'm not sure, but I can email Susan and ask her if they have anybody who would be willing to assist with that. But I think we need to have that in place before we order anything
I
or proceed.
agree. I agree. It is challenging for us to commit to the maintenance of all of those. At Front Beach, it's easier because we do have a
station.
A station, we have a
Right.
station there, and we have an attendant that works there every weekend, so we have some eyes and ears in that location, which makes it easier, and we've asked them to monitor the toy bin as well, that's next to the showers. But in some of these other locations, it's just, it's much harder, because we do not have any dedicated staff
Right.
Yeah.
that could take that on.
If I can add, I know we're really pressed for time, I won't go into it. We're all passionate about litter and reducing it and managing it and keeping our island cleaner and so forth. And as I said to Sandy, so I'm using this as my opinion, you may or may not agree, but we're talking about these fill-a-bag programs being erected near the trash cans. And my point is, most of the litter on the beach doesn't come from residents, or people that care about litter will walk to the trash can and throw it out. I don't know how many guests on the beach would actually get a bucket and go pick up litter. So I do think it's going to be a resident-initiated program, and we've got so many other important things we're doing right now. With respect, I don't think the timing is right to proceed with this year.
Okay, thank you. So is everybody okay with that decision? Okay.
Yes, I
All right,
agree.
that sounds good, thank you. And the only other thing I wanted to mention, and this is really a question for Deb, because I know you were involved in in some management of short-term rentals, or with
Yeah.
yes. So is it possible, I was thinking here about glass recycling, and whether or not there might be some interest in encouraging people who are managing properties to have an additional bin, like the old bins we used to have, that people could separate their glass and have, and then the people who do the maintenance of the units could recycle that. Is there any possibility of that, or is that something that we?
I think that's a really slim chance of happening.
I thought you might say
Honestly.
that.
Yeah, I mean, I wish,
Uh-huh.
that there were enough people involved in managing these properties to do that. But it's already, barely getting by doing what we have to do
Yeah, okay.
on turnover days in particular.
Right, okay.
I think the best we could do is, have a brochure available in the home, or put it in the check-in email, or, even create a separate email to guests saying, hey, by the way, our island does this, if you're interested. But yeah, the separate, I just don't think we have the manpower to
Okay.
manage that,
Okay.
unfortunately.
So what about, how would we get, so the separate email, or having something in the, like, welcome email,
Right,
or in those books that people put in their short-term rentals?
yep.
How would we go about that, getting out?
You would need to contact each property management group on the island, and I think they're all right here.
Well,
Could throw a rock at all of them,
Uh-huh.
They're all-
There's now the IOP Chamber of Commerce, and I believe most of the management companies are members. And, the city helped and supported the creation of the IOP Chamber so that it would be an easier source, to kind of organize a lot of the business community in the island to facilitate some of the dissemination of information. So I think that would be something that they would be willing to hear and make recommendations, and hear your recommendations about what
I mean,
the
we could-
short-term rental companies could be
We could
doing.
probably work through Chandra to provide a,
Yeah.
Chandra?
Chandra, yeah.
Chandra, to
Like
provide a, like a handout that could be put into a plastic sleeve that goes into the welcome book.
Yeah, we can certainly create something that we can share with the companies that they can use and distribute in their properties, absolutely.
Okay, yeah. That was all that I had. And do we want to wait until Douglas is back to do the update on the sea level rise adaptation, or?
I can give you an update. We presented the recommendation from the Planning Commission. Planning Commission interviewed the two vendors, contractors, firms that presented proposals. They were very, very close in terms of qualifications. They felt like both of them were highly qualified. So it really came down to price. We received cost proposals from both, and ultimately the lower price came from Seaman Whiteside. And we presented that recommendation to council at their workshop on Tuesday, and they will be taking action on that proposal at their regular meeting on June 27th. So we anticipate being able to execute a contract after council approves that proposal, and have a kickoff meeting and get that project going.
Great, that sounds good, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
So, I don't think there's any new business that I'm aware of. We've kind of talked about some new things all along. Next meeting is scheduled for Thursday, July the 13th. And it'll be at 4 o'clock again. And I think that is all we have for today. Is there a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Second.
All in favor?